Alrighty, welcome everyone. We're going to begin another Photoshop demonstration. Today we're going to create what I call the Daguerrotype portrait. The Daguerrotype photography is one of the oldest forms of photography. It was developed in the late 1800s. Oftentimes you see subjects of the Wild West, cowboys and Native Americans, and they often have this kind of like this deadpan expression on their face, and that is because of the technique. It was a long exposure, often 2 to 3 minutes long, to get the photo, which meant the subject had to hold still, and because of this, it was hard to hold a smile. So, in order to document the people, that's just how they had to present themselves. So that's the kind of look we're going after here. And as you can see with this one particular gentleman, that's exactly what he's doing. The other thing is that it would print on a metal plate. So oftentimes these images over time would be scratched, and that's kind of the damage we see. And we also have kind of these watermarks. Again, just over time, these images just fade, and they're heavily based on blue light. So we'll kind of get into that a bit, which kind of determines the contrast and the kind of values that come through this kind of image. So we're going to be trying to mimic these different characteristics of this style of photography to really capture the essence of kind of this old-timey photo. And I like to kind of look at this as like our first demonstration was making an old photo look new again. Well, this demonstration we're going to be taking a new photo and making it look old. And we're going to be focusing a lot on blending modes, more work in the layers palette, and just how layers work, and the different kinds of layers you can use. But for some other examples, we have these are all students of mine from previous semesters, by the way, and you'll be doing your own photo like this by the time we're done here. But just some other sources of inspiration, I suppose. And the idea here is by the end, we will have completed one together, but then you're going to go and do one on your own. And this is going to be your homework for this week. You're going to need to take a portrait, a photograph of yourself, with kind of that deadpan expression, just to mimic the style photography. It kind of sells the old photo, that much more. But also, I want you to look for some different clothing that you have, or maybe that you can find, and even some accessories. Like this guy had a sword, which was kind of cool. And typically, I'll take the whole class down to the costume closet down in the theater. We spend a good chunk of our class time down there, and I would do that with you guys, except that with these COVID precautions, it's just not a responsible thing to do to just share clothing like this. So I'm asking you to find your own clothing that might fit into this time period. I would say anywhere between 1860 to about 1940. So, see what you have. It can really be as simple as just a plain dress, a plain jacket in this case, maybe kind of a hat that depicts, an era, and see what you can come up with. You'll need somebody to take the picture of you. Or you can put your camera on a tripod and set it to a timer. A cell phone image is perfectly acceptable. And you'll want a blank background. And you'll see once we really get into this just how easy this photograph is to take. The real selling point is your wardrobe. So try to get rid of anything you're wearing that would nod to modern day. She almost took her glasses off, but decided that in the end they were kind of an older looking style, with the exception of maybe the see-through frames. That the shape of them seemed to work, and you know, I agree. So you can get away with some things, but for the most part, you just want to be attentive to those little details when taking your own photo. So I'll remind you of all this at the end of the demonstration. So let's just get right into it. So I'm going to close these out for now. And I'm then going to go to the server. So I'm going to navigate to our class, going to go to demo files, and in here we have the Daguerrotype photo file. So I'm going to click and drag this to my desktop so that I'm working from my own files, not off the server. And I can close the server out for now and open up this folder, and let's take a look at what we have. So these are the final images that I've just presented to you. And then we have a series of dust and scratches. Okay, so these are all just texturized images that actually came from real Daguerrotype photos, and they were these scans were cleaned up and made for this purpose. In the vintage photo textures, same thing, only we have more of the water damage and just kind of that grungy feel. So we have a lot to choose from, and I'm going to let you choose whichever one you like for your particular portrait. But we'll look at some specific ones for this demonstration. And in the portraits section, and this is where we're going to begin, we have 3 different portraits. And as you can see, they look very different from the originals. They've come a long way, is to say. And we have a blank background. The lighting isn't great, but again, you can get away with a lot of that. And you'll notice we have objects in the background. That's okay too, as long as it's not obstructing around your particular subject, because we'll be able to crop those things out. All right, so I'm going to start with James here because I like his sword, and believe it or not, I think his coat is actually a lady's coat. But when you get into the final look, you don't really, that's not really the focus of it, right? So there's a lot that's kind of hidden just in just changing the tone of the image. I'm going to click and drag this into the Photoshop app, and here we go. So the first things first, we want to crop out the objects in the background. So I'm going to grab my crop tool, and it kind of already does it for me. I have some settings up here already that are set to 180p by 180p. I don't actually want those, so I'm going to click clear, and then I'm going to crop around this. And what I'm trying to do is just select the area that I want. So I think that looks pretty good. Once you like it, you're just going to hit this little check button here, and it's going to crop everything out except for what you had selected. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make it black and white. And this is this can be done in a number of ways. We can go to image mode grayscale and just say discard, and it gets rid of all of the color. But we're not going to do it that way. We're actually going to focus on a more precise way of making this black and white that is truer to the Daguerrotype technique. And that is that we're going to choose, there are different channels to an image. As I stated in the RGB color mode, there's red, green, and blue. Well, the Daguerrotype technique was really sensitive to blue light. So we're actually going to bring that through more than the other colors. And we can do this by adding what's called an adjustment layer. And an adjustment layer works a little differently than just a regular layer in your layers palette. Let's go ahead and unlock this layer so we can see it, and we can call this subject. That's our person. And then to add an adjustment layer, we want to click the adjustment layers palette or tab. If you don't see this, you can go up to Window and choose Adjustments, and it should pop up for you. So what I'm going to do now is that I have my adjustment layer options here in little icons. I'm going to choose the one that looks like a little Venn diagram, and that is the RGB icon. You know, the 3 different colors working together. And if you hover over it, you can see it says Channel Mixer. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And what that does is it applies this channel or this adjustment layer to my layers palette, and then it gives me a set of parameters here I can customize. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say I want this to be monochrome, so 1 color. And then I'm going to take the red light and I'm going to make that 0. Then I'm going to take the green light, make that 0. And then I'm going to take the blue light and make that 100%. Okay? And what that does is it just gives us a slightly different contrast than just simply going to grayscale. And the way this works is that anything underneath the adjustment layer is affected by these parameters. So if I were to click and drag this above the channel mixer, I'd get my color back, okay? Because it's not underneath this adjustment layer. So adjustment layers are basically layers with effects added to them that apply to anything underneath them. And the advantage to this is that I still have color on this image. So if I ever want to go back to using the color found in this image, I can either adjust the parameters of this or simply pull it out from underneath that that layer. Okay. If I were, as I said before, to simply just go to grayscale, I'd never get that color back if I wanted it. So it's a less damaging way of making your image black and white, or in any particular instance, I mean, there's all kinds of adjustments you can make depending on which one you choose, and they all behave the same way. Okay, so now we have a nice black and white image. And so what we want to do is we want to add some texture to it to give it that old-timey looking feel. So let's go ahead and navigate to File, Open, and grab one of our images. So if I go to, where are we? PS Photo Daguerrotype. There we go. So I'm going to start with my vintage photo texture layers, and the one we're going to be using is number 18. Okay, for this particular demonstration, you'll have the ability to use whatever one you want when you make your own, so that's why I've given so many options here, but we're going to use 18 for this one. We're going to hit Open, and it opens it up in a separate tab. And what I'd like to do is just simply go to Select All or Command A. Then we're going to go to Edit, Copy. Then we're going to jump right into here and we're going to say Edit, Paste. And it pastes that texture right inside our image. So now I want to flip it vertically and resize it to my image. So the way we can do that is by going to Edit, Free Transform, or Command T. This is going to be an important shortcut you'll want to remember because you'll be using this quite a lot for all of your projects in Photoshop. And what it does is it adds this bounding box on your object and allows you to click those anchor points that are found in all corners and even in the center to scale it up or down. But also, if you hover over the corners here, you can rotate it. And if you hold down shift when you rotate, it actually rotates it in more precise angles so that you can actually rotate it perfectly 90 degrees, which is what we want to do. I'm then going to click on it and drag it to the top here. Then I'm going to scale it to the size. And if again you hold shift when resizing it, it'll actually allow you to squash it to the exact size of the image itself. Once you've covered up the whole thing, just hit enter or return, and it releases it from the bounding box. Now here's the cool part. Here's where it really starts to come to life, is when we apply what's called a blending mode. And we touched on this a little bit in the previous demonstration, but here we are. I'm going to double click this and call this Dag Texture. And then for every layer we have a blending mode. So depending on which one you choose will create something different. I tend to favor the screen blending mode simply because it gets rid of all the black. It makes all the black of the image I'm affecting invisible. So I'm going to choose screen, and already it's looking pretty darn good, right? But we can actually fine-tune this a little bit, and we can do that by choosing the opacity slider and maybe making that a little lighter. Ever so slightly. I ended up at 76%, so you can do that. And now I'm going to add another texture, and that can be found in File, Open. I'm going to navigate to my Film Dust Textures, and you can see we have all kinds here, and it's all random different patterns of dust. I'm going to choose number 2, I think. So I'm going to go to Select All, Copy, come into my photo, choose Paste, Edit, Paste. All right, same deal. So I'm going to hit Command T to get my bounding box for free transform, rotate it, stretch it, and maybe I'll rotate it this way so that the dust is more heavily on this side. Hit enter to release it, and then change my blending mode to be screen. Sure, screen. So you can kind of toggle that on and off to see how it's affected. Okay, now the last thing is adding kind of a warm sepia tone, and we can do that by choosing gradient map. Again, we're in the adjustment layers palette. So the gradient map is that last one, and you know what it's, you can tell it what it is by reading the title up here. So whenever you hover over them, you can see. I'm just going to click that and say, yeah, apply that. So you can see now by default I have this pink color. If you want to change that, which we certainly do, you're just going to click on this gradient like strip here, and it brings up this window. And in order to change these colors, we're just going to click on that color, and then down here we have this color swatch. We're going to make this come down into the oranges, kind of this deep brown, and you can see it changing with it. And we're going to OK, and then we're going to change the white to just more of a creamy color somewhere up here. And you know, this isn't precise stuff. You just find a color you like. I think that works. We just hit OK. So there you have it. But with the dust and scratches, that tends to be more of a dimensional thing and not so much found on the image itself. So I actually want to bring my dust and scratches, and I can relabel this. I call it dust. Label this, and then click and drag it above the gradient image, and you can see how those come through as white. Okay, the difference is that right now the whitest image under the gradient map is going to be that cream color we selected. But the second I pull it out from under the adjustment layer, they become white. And hopefully this is obvious to you on the screen, but here's the difference if I zoom in. This is my dust. When it's under the gradient, it takes on that cream color. But when I bring it above, it's no longer affected by the gradient map and it goes back to white. So to me, just that subtle difference really kind of adds a little more dimension to the portrait. And this is kind of what we're left with. So those are the steps you need to take to create your own. What I'd like you to do is save this project. So we're going to go to Save As and save it to your, save it to the desktop, which tends to be a little easier. And I'll just call this DAG Demo, and then give me your name. Save it to the desktop. That way, once you close it, you can connect to the server. Waiting for the server. There it is. Navigate to your file, and in the homework folder, I want you to just click and drag that right in there, so that is you handing in your showing that you've completed this demonstration. But then I also want you, as I said at the beginning of this video, to take your own portrait and choose clothing and accessories that would, portray a certain time period within this this particular style of photography. Like I said, anywhere between 1860 to say like 1940. So basically, I mean, that's a pretty big span of time in terms of fashion. That's really from the Civil War to I guess just before World War II. So it can be as simple as just a button-down shirt with maybe some suspenders, or having some sort of old-timey ball cap, or try to be creative with it. Think about, if you wear glasses, are they modern looking glasses, or should you take them off? Are you wearing jewelry, or do you have a phone in your pocket? Get rid of those things that give away the time period, because we want to be as convincing as possible. So you're going to take these same steps and apply them to your project, and also hand that into the homeworks folder. Okay? So I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with, and I'll see you in the next video.